So welcome to this second episode of Create Connects, titled Toolkit for Artists with Google Creative Lab. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that all of us here on this virtual platform are physically located somewhere on Aboriginal land across this place we call New South Wales. I live and work on Bidjigal land and take this opportunity to pay respects to elders past, present and future. My name is Beck Dean and I'm a manager in Arts Funding and Development at Create New South Wales, and my colleague Ivana Jovanovic is in the background and will be helping to moderate your questions as you go. The chat box you'll find located in the right hand side of the screen, and it has a little bubble over it. In that chat box, there's a link to live captions. If you need live captions, you can go to this link, and that will happen for you as the webinar progresses. So we're really delighted today to be joined by three guests from Google Creative Lab in Sydney. They are Jonathan Richards, who's the lead of Creative Lab. He's weaving now. Sean Kelly, a creative technologist, and Kartini Ludwig, producer. Thank you so much, guys. We're so happy to have you here today to share your knowledge and the resources you've prepared for us with artists and producers and presenters and all sorts of creative practitioners in New South Wales who are sort of grappling with this new reality. I'm really excited about this presentation also because there's a lot of practical and accessible material here, which I probably could have used a few weeks ago actually when we started doing these kinds of webinars, and had a pretty disastrous start actually. This is much better, although, you know, we can sort of imagine broadcasting to a wider sort of range of people as well. So Google are really wonderfully making these presentations available, and they'll be on the website when we submit the recording of this video, and you'll be able to access them there. So I'll hand over to Kartini and Sean, but before I do, please do check into the chat box and add your questions there. For anyone who isn't presenting, we ask you to turn off your cameras if you can do that, just so that you're looking at the people that are presenting and you have a better access to what they're saying. That would be great. So yes, please present. Kartini and Sean, lovely to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. So my name is Kartini and I'm a producer at Google's Creative Lab, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which I am presenting from today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and of course thank you to Create New South Wales for having us here today. I thought I'd just get started with a little bit about Google's Creative Lab and who we are. So we are actually a group of creators, developers, creative technologists and filmmakers who usually will be experimenting with Google's tools and exploring the potential of emerging digital technologies with cultural partners. And we're often working at that intersection of art and tech. So in the current circumstance, we kind of put our regular run of work on hold and pivoted to look at how we could how we could support the impacted arts industry. So the presentation you're about to see, as the subtitle, it's performing live online, a very much still in progress guide to live performance in the time of COVID. It's a guide and summary of our learnings realized in collaboration with a group of theatre makers and cultural organizations who, I suppose, like many of you who have tuned in today, are curious to figure out how we can bring live performance to digital audiences in such uncertain times. So over the course of about 4 to 6 weeks, we've kind of collaborated with specifically The Last Great Hunt, Griffin Theatre, Opera Queensland, and a company based down in Melbourne called Sandpit. And I guess for the sake of time today, we'll be talking to this resource kind of more on a high level, I suppose, since it is quite text dense at times. So like what was mentioned earlier is that this is a resource that will be shared and feel free to share with whoever you think might be helpful to. And if there's a platform that maybe you haven't caught anything to yet, just rest assured that we're going to be sharing the presentation afterwards, and it's meant to be consumed in that kind of way. Also, another resource that we wanted to share is one by Google Arts and Culture, who have a similar resource called Connected to Culture, that really kind of complements this line of inquiry, but it's a bit more broad and kind of talks to, I guess the case studies we've done so far have been with more so theatre makers, but they kind of look to as well as like how they can take things like museum exhibitions online as well. Also, I guess just to say that this is a summary of what we've discovered so far, and by no means do we kind of claim that it holds like all the answers, but we do hope it helps to empower and inspire people out there who are looking to kind of stay afloat, maintain community engagement, and get some footing in this space through performing live online. And we've seen firsthand that this kind of can be done and be done on a budget. So yeah, if we want to just turn to our table of contents and where you can kind of navigate to through this and what we're going to be speaking to today, I'm just going to quickly go over all the things that you might need to get started, as well as then Sean here, my colleague, is going to talk a little bit more about how to become a live stream pro, and then we have a couple of case studies to share with you that we've been exploring and experimenting with in the last couple of weeks. Getting started for the next slide. It's just a few little things. Some of it might seem kind of obvious, but sometimes in these kind of overwhelming times, it's good to kind of get a sense and a list of how we do get started. And so the first thing you often will need, and that you should be lucky enough to have, I suppose, is a computer with a working webcam. Also, I guess a lot of smartphones have a working webcam photo function, a microphone. We recommend using Google Chrome, as that's the platform we've been using and testing towards, a Gmail account, which is easy enough to set up, and setting up a YouTube Live account as well, which Sean will go into a little bit more detail shortly after this. So without further ado, I will just pass over to Sean to talk to you a little bit more about how to become a live stream professional.
Thank you so much, Kartini. So thank you for the introduction. I am Sean Kelly. I'm a creative technologist with the Google Creative Lab in Sydney, though I am currently working from my apartment in Los Angeles, California. And for reference, if you can't see the screen, I'm a fair-skinned man in my mid-20s and a bit scruffier than usual due to isolation. So really grateful for the chance to be here. And let's jump right into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do, regardless of the streaming platform that we end up using, and we're going to talk a lot about that a bit later, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually check your internet connection, because all of these platforms, regardless of which one you decide to use, will require a fairly strong internet connection. And we understand that not everyone's going to be able to have a perfect internet connection, but in our tests, we found things as simple as moving closer to your wireless router or using your phone's personal 4G hotspot can dramatically improve your connection and give you faster upload speeds, so that you are able to stream to whichever platform you eventually decide. And there will be a link, again, as Kartini mentioned, all of this will be shared afterward. So we have a great internet speed test link for you here. You can use basically any. And if your upload speed is above about 8 megabits per second or so, you're in a good spot, regardless of the platform that you choose. Moving on, so one of these live streaming platforms that you can use is YouTube Live. We've seen good results with different streaming platforms. One thing that we wouldn't recommend is doing it yourself. We saw, I mean, we've seen huge arts organizations with a tremendous amount of technical bandwidth and IT support try to host streams on their own website, but because the demand is so high, we're then seeing those websites crash. because video hosting is actually a pretty difficult thing to do. So YouTube Live is free, it's open, it manages basically every feature you can imagine, and it just gives you the peace of mind. You know it's going to work. It's a stream, and that's just your audience, right? Because I mean, if you don't have an audience, you're just talking to your own computer. The viewership you can expect on YouTube or any other traditional streaming platform is going to depend on what kind of organization you are and what kind of marketing reach you have. So YouTube isn't a guaranteed ticket to having a really huge event, but it does enable really huge events with its technical backend. And let's say you want to move beyond just kind of you in front of a computer streaming, and you want to have multiple performers in different locations, maybe more editing tools, different filters you can apply, the option for donations and tips, or options for audience members to actually contribute to the content of your stream. There will be some softwares we recommend here to use. And I just want to, before I go into the next slide, reiterate two things. First, I mean, the more technical we get, and as we get into actual recommendations around software, a lot of times what we saw with our creative partners who really, it's their projects that informed this deck, software that they were more comfortable with worked out better, right? So there might be a software that you're really comfortable with that can enable streaming that isn't on this list. And if you're already tech savvy, that might be a better place to start, just because you already understand the system and how it works. So here is a non-exhaustive list of a few things that worked for our partners. These aren't products made by Google. This is what worked for them. So in every way, these enable a richer experience in YouTube Live. So they add a layer between you, the performer, and YouTube Live, which is the audience. There's a layer in between there where you can add various features and enable your stream to make it a lot more engaging. Again, we're going to be sharing this deck after the talk, so I'm not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty details. I'll just do a quick pass over anything, and if you have any more questions about any of this, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and you can ask me whatever you want about this. So one software we saw that worked really well for those of us who are less tech savvy is called Stage 10. And Stage 10, it works just in the browser. You don't have to download anything, and it plugs really nicely into YouTube. So for instance, if you have multiple performers in multiple locations, what it does is it takes all of those video streams and unifies them into one video. And as you can see our video here, there's a few of us testing, and essentially what it allows you to do is almost like a broadcaster, have a stream with multiple performers in one video feed going straight to YouTube. And that enables obviously a richness of the experience, but also different interactions you can play with and different creative possibilities within it. Moving on, maybe if you're a bit more tech savvy, and I apologize for the helicopter above me, is Switcher Studio. So this we see good results with if you're iPad or iPhone based. Maybe you need to be mobily controlling the stream. So you might be a performer in the show that you're putting on with multiple performers, and you need to be able to covertly switch the stream or change the overlay or change the overall visual design of your stream wirelessly. And this is a good result for that. It has similar features to Stage 10, which I forgot to mention. Stage 10 does have a free option. This is a paid service, but we are seeing it as a realistic expense for kind of one technical level up. One more technical level up is a service called Streamlabs OBS, and we should not glaze over. OBS is called Open Broadcaster Software, and it's very much like a gold standard when it comes to streaming and streaming to YouTube Live or Twitch or any number of other live stream services. And what Streamlabs OBS does is that plugs into OBS to make it a bit more user-friendly and give you a few more features that might enrich your stream. So you can do things like request tips and donations, and if someone is feeling generous and they love their show, they can give you a $10 tip, and there could be a message at the bottom of your screen and a sound effect of everyone cheering or whatever you want to do creatively with the system. And obviously it has huge amounts of effects, different overlays. So if you want to play with color or make it look like you're green screened in a different location or things like that. And it also supports multiple performers as well. And lastly, we have Wirecast. It's at a price point that is probably more appropriate for larger, more established arts organizations who aren't afraid to tinker around a little bit, and they're very comfortable technically, maybe have their own like, IT professional within, or a technically minded person. But it captures a lot of the features that we've talked about before, and it's really kind of the whole package. So a lot of features, a lot of control. It's not the most approachable of these, but you can really make your final stream on YouTube Live or wherever else you're streaming look however you want, with a lot of flexibility in how many performers you have or the visual art style. And if that's not totally clear right now, that's fine. We have a few examples later in the deck of our case studies with our creative partners, and you can see how they're using these different features around multi-camera and different filters. Without spoiling too much, there's a cardboard noir, which is entirely in black and white, and using props that you can find within your home, and using features like this, they're able to tell a really compelling story by holding papers in front of the screen, black and white filter and things like that. So moving on, if you wanted to have an event very similar to this, maybe with Q&A or a webinar style, we actually have found, or our creative partners have found that Zoom has worked really, really well for them. So Zoom, we find, excels when you have a small group of people who need to talk to a large group of people. So you can have a few people designated as presenters, and then a larger group of people who are attendees. This allows features like Q&A. You can poll the audience. Audience members can raise their hand, and we can actually bring people from the audience or attendees session onto the panel to ask a question using their microphone. And we're finding it's really reliable, a great kind of one-click system, and our partners have had good luck with it. And now we're on to tickets and donations, which is very important because we understand a lot of this is actually supporting many people's livelihoods. And so I will pass it back to Kartini, who is the expert on this.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so we just wanted to put forward, I guess, how you can sell tickets to your event. And some people might be familiar with Eventbrite already. It's actually something I've used for a personal project event and in the past. And the thing that we want to highlight as a part of this is that with your event details, with your online event details, you can embed that into Eventbrite when you're creating an event. It's as simple as you can see in the screen grab here, there's an option to click online event when you're putting your location in. And I guess other than that, the beauty of it is the way that it gives you different ticketing options, which means that you can limit the number of tickets you might want to offer, especially for maybe some platforms that you'll be using, whether it is Zoom or, I guess similar to the platform we're using today, where it might be limited, so you can cap the number of attendees. But you can also make sure that there's donation options to kind of give people the opportunity to pay what they want for particular live performances. It means that you can put your YouTube live stream in there, you can put in the Zoom webinar details in there as part of the ticketing information, or even as just a part of the location on the information. So depending how open you want it or secure you want it to be. And the ticketing is just one of those things in this time. And when we kind of were initially talking to our partners about how important the ritual of, I guess, traditional theatre is, in the way that we might go in and hand a ticket over, and it kind of prompts you to pay a bit more attention to the thing that is about to be performed. Where, as in this digital kind of age, it's interesting that, we're so used to double screening, and how can we get ourselves in the right mindset to be able to kind of pay attention to the thing that we're contributed to be able to interact with it, if that is the case or otherwise. So yeah, it kind of thinking about how Eventbrite, it could be used for ticketing, even for an online event where maybe the link is open or not, is a really good way to kind of engage with your audience and your community. And also kind of links in with PayPal, which if you can turn to the next slide, Sean, is all about how we can let an audience make a donation. So one of the big key things here, and what we kind of recommend, is setting up a PayPal account, because that actually also links in with Eventbrite if you want to be able to accept donations through that. And then also, it kind of links up to a number of other platforms that we've kind of come across. And the beauty with, once you've set up a PayPal account, you can create a donation link. And within this donation link, it gives you the option and the code to be able to either embed a donation link button using the HTML into your website, or you can get a shareable URL, which you can then share in your live stream, whether that's as a part of your YouTube description or as a part, again, of your ticket in your Eventbrite. So it just gives people multiple options to kind of pay what they want to attend a live performance online. And then the second thing, and what we have here, is the ability to kind of further engage with the community through online donations, where you can display live donations with Streamlabs OBS. And OBS, I'll just recap, is the open broadcasting software. It's one of the platforms that we have used, or what our partners have used. And once you set up an account with Streamlabs, it means that you have the option to kind of engage with different kind of ways that donations are going to be reflected in your live stream. So, for example, here, the performer has embedded a link as a part of the YouTube live description. People are donating during the live stream, and then it's reflected in the actual performance live. So it's just an extra way to kind of engage your community. You can set donation goals, a donation ticker. It's also a different way to engage, maybe if you are trying to track followers, if you're into a social media engagement as well, and just different ways that you can kind of reward the performer and interact with the performer at the time of the live performance. The next thing we wanted to just touch on is how we can make the performance accessible, and we kind of see this in two different avenues, and one of them being all about kind of something we like to call digital hygiene, and how you can promote your event on Google search. When we talk about digital hygiene, we're kind of talking a little bit about the practice of maintaining, I guess, the way that your company's digital presence appears on search, and what impressions you give a user if they were to just punch in a few keywords and your company's name in search. So using something called Google My Business, which is actually a free account and something that is as easy as setting up as a Gmail account, you can kind of investigate and click in posts and add and update details of maybe your online event. Or it's also a great way just to make sure that you're keeping your usual I guess audiences and community or benefactors up to date with maybe how you're responding to the current circumstance, and having that kind of front and center. If someone was to search you, you get a little panel that comes up on the right of search, so they don't even necessarily have to click into your website yet. It's just kind of the first thing that pops up. So yeah, it's just a good thing to think about how to maintain that, and think about maybe the way that you are represented, even with like the company information, your opening times, and how you can be contacted. So that is one way that we like to think about how to make your performance successful. The other way, of course, is we just like to think about how you can add subtitles to your online performance, because it is in fact live, through live captioning using something called stream text, which can work with YouTube Live as well. So stream text allows you to add captions and display them in real time. As you can see, if you are in your, once you might have set up a performance and maybe you use OBS, or you're using something like Zoom that goes to OBS, and then you're going to be live streaming it on YouTube. Whatever is your final output and platform for I guess distributing, if it was YouTube, you go into the control room of that settings, you manage the tab. Under stream latency, you would kind of select a low latency or normal, and you would post captions to the URL. And so that's a really great way to kind of cater for all audiences, especially for the deaf or hearing impaired. I realized that I just kind of I get a little bit of a workflow of how these kind of things go with the multiple different platforms that kind of feed into each other. So we're going to move on now to our first case study, which is all about how to create an online detective thriller for your audience to solve. And who in the world would kind of be up to do something like this? It was actually the Griffin Theatre was one of our partners who did this. And not only did they actually just produce one show, they actually did 5 shows over the course of 5 nights. And so we have a clip here actually from the artistic director Declan Green that we'll play shortly, which is a bit of a compilation of footage from all the different shows and performances of each night. But we will be talking a little bit more specifically about one particular show of the 5 called Thirsty by Rochelle Fong. So we'll just play this out so you can get a little insight into that.
My name's Declan Green. I'm the artistic director of Griffin Theatre Company. And for Griffin Lock-In, we commissioned 5 artists to create new works specifically for live stream. We were really interested in the fact that in the wake of lockdown, a lot of theatre companies were putting up a lot of filmed broadcast content that was like standard live shows being filmed, but we were really interested in looking at how live streaming technology could be used to really harness liveness and create and use a platform like YouTube as an interface for a live happening thing between a performer and an audience. So that was effectively the brief that we gave to our performers.
So my name's Rochelle Fong and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I've been making immersive site-specific theatre shows for the last couple of years. And so, yeah, it was really exciting to bring that from the streets to online. And for Griffin Lock-In, my show Thirsty is an interactive techno-noir detective thriller. And in it, the audience are playing online detectives who are guiding the protagonist, Melanie Wong, as she meets the perpetrator of her uncle's hate crime. So the audience are helping Mel as she goes undercover on this fake first date at Jared's house. They get to vote on what she wears, what she drinks, where she looks for incriminating evidence, and also suggest tactics for her to make him accountable for his actions.
So yes, an interactive techno-noir detective thriller that gave the audience a different ways to interact, and a lot of that was kind of through different overlays that they used, that they kind of would broadcast as a part of the mix of the actual live performance, and then they used Streamlabs OBS, I think, to be able to input different overlays throughout the performance. And so it's thinking about how can you elevate your performance by doing a mix of like pre-recorded assets as well as the live performance itself, so that it is in fact actually live. So yeah, in the slide here you can see a few examples and clips from the performance itself, as well. Like for example, on the bottom right here we see the option of where you can pick what Rochelle or Melanie Wong, the character in the play, is going to wear, and then within the YouTube live comments at the time, everyone kind of had the opportunity to vote on which one she would wear, and then that was what she would be wearing in the next scene. So kind of gamifying the experience to give us an elevated sense of engagement for the audience when we are doing these online performances. So the next thing we wanted to just talk to a little bit was what worked for us in terms of the tech setup, or what worked for Griffin Lock-In. We have a clip here from David Bergman, who was the technical director on the Griffin Lock-In show week, but it is a bit long, so we won't go into too much detail. But the main thing is, or I guess the thing to take from this, is that he talks about his tech setup, and as I said, they use OBS to YouTube as their kind of primary platforms as a way to reach their audiences, and as well as Zoom as kind of like the backstage space or where they're interacting. And then interestingly as well, which was a really great little hack that these guys did was they used Google Docs as almost like a live texting stream, or almost like a live chat. So between, because there's a bit of a delay between the YouTube stream, the interaction, and how people are voting, so that the actors in the actual play or in the performance didn't have to necessarily run between looking at themselves on the actual live stream. They use Google Docs to kind of communicate with the backstage technical directors and the broadcast director to kind of tell them what the audience had maybe voted on. So yeah, it's interesting ways of thinking all about that. And then we have a couple more clips in here that we would love to share with you, one from Rochelle and one from Declan, and we'll save the other one for you to catch up on in your own time. The first one is Rochelle talking about how to turn the audience into storytellers.
Tried to really set up like the mission, I guess, for the audience at the beginning, which was one of the big learnings from the whole process, which is, you know, there's a unique challenge in the online space to really grab audiences early so that they don't drop off and make them feel very invested. So it was really like such a learning experience for me working with Declan on the dramaturgy of it and just figuring out where to place things and kind of and how. So yeah, I guess setting up their mission at the beginning, kind of using this gamification style approach to the show and positioning the audiences as active storytellers. So I guess the audience got to vote on costume and different actions that the protagonists could enact, and that was all serving their overall goal of, I guess, keeping me safe, but like getting the evidence from the perpetrator and also getting a confession out of him. It was really fun to play with the audience, and as a performer, like I was a little bit scared at first with being so open to interaction, but actually it just kind of made the work, I think. And a lot of the feedback that we got from audience members, without fail, they would talk about the comment feed and how that was kind of informing the actual show itself, and I think the sense of camaraderie and like little community that developed with amongst the audience members as they were trying to work out how to influence the characters was really special, and it made it feel like, you know, they were all in it together, which was exciting.
And then up next we have Declan just kind of talking a little bit about that liveness aspect as well, which I just think is super interesting to hear from.
So I think early on we had assumed that we would have to see about building a whole bunch of controls to create a sense of community or interactivity between the performers and the audience. But one of the really interesting discoveries that I think we made through doing lock-in was just that the live chat function in YouTube actually did that already. Just the fact that across the 5 lock-in performances, you would see people's handles night after night, that people would engage in little conversations and live commentary during the performance, talk to one another, use applause emojis. You could really feel a mass of people watching this thing and moving at once at times, and sometimes you would, sitting watching it, feel euphoric and feel sad, and in a way it did really have a degree of equivocation in terms of the experience you would have in a live performance space, even though you weren't at all. And I think that was a really huge surprise and discovery for us, that you could actually do it very simply in this platform.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm just going to pass over to Sean now to go over our other case study that we're presenting to you today. And that will be all for me, and I'll see you in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kartini. So another really exciting project that we saw where a lot of these elements came together was with a theater collective by the name of The Last Great Hunt. They're really exciting, we know them well, and they made the perfect car chase from cardboard cutouts. And if you're not quite sure what that means, I think that makes a lot of sense. But here we can see some images from, let me just check if there's a video here. Yeah, we'll go straight to here. I'll show you the overall video. about their cardboard noir and how they utilize different effects and household objects to set a scene.
My logline about the show would be a kind of like a live virtual theatre experience that is based around a kind of noir story of a woman called Bad Baby Jean who breaks out of jail to return to her long lost love.
And then I will just bring up the video again. I'll go back to a few screenshots from this. So to describe this, they describe it as a craptastic aesthetic, which I personally love as a craptastic connoisseur myself. Everything that we saw there were just household objects, cardboard and paper and torches and low budget costumes with a fairly simple multi-camera setup. And despite the technical simplicity of what they did, I personally felt like it was a really compelling effect. So you can see here on the screen, they were just papers taped to walls, and they were using, you know, occasionally they were using camera tricks, and often they were using just toothpicks or sticks attached to these papers to make the car appear like it's driving or things like that. So something doesn't have to be high budget to be good. And here is their tech stack, which is a really good example of something that worked for them. So they were already using QLab. If you're an existing arts organization, I think QLab, what we're seeing is used with near ubiquity for lighting and sound control and things. And so they actually figured out a way for QLab to sit in between Skype, which is where all their performers were, and OBS, which is how they stream it to YouTube, as we mentioned. And QLab was kind of handling the different transitions between the different Skype feeds. So all of that was completely done live in a meeting similar to this one. And it's a really good example of them using software that they were already comfortable with to create a really compelling effect. Similar to the earlier video, we saw the technical director on that project, Tim, will talk through kind of this full tech stack in this video, which I really encourage you all to watch later. It is quite dense, but it is absolutely fascinating, really creative, and you might get some ideas on what's right for you or your organization. So I will now play a video on, sorry, I have to pull it up, on a really interesting part of their creative process. So Adrienne Daff, who is one of the founding artists from this theater collective, wanted to explore something that couldn't be done in a traditional theater, and also something that couldn't be done just in front of a webcam, right? Isolation's Got Talent has been great to see, but they wanted to actually utilize the format and create something that artistically could only be expressed through this format. So she can say it much more eloquently than I can, so I'll pass to her.
There was something really lovely about doing things that we can't do in theatre, like black and white and a car chase, that sort of came out of like a fun experiment. But then it's interesting because when you start sort of like putting all the bits together, noir just became this kind of really playful, fun thing to a fun world to play in, because it also felt really accessible.
So one of the problems we often have when we're making a show is that we'll make it look really good from front center, and then some of the times the sightlines get a little bit shitty. And so in this instance, everyone's got the same view, and it's also what we're seeing.
I mean, nothing's ever going to like equal what you can do sort of in person, of course, in a theatre together, but I'm very excited to see what other discoveries we might happen upon along the way, because that's obviously something where you don't know what you don't know. So you can't, we sort of often will start an investigation or an experiment and just stumble upon something where you go, that's just fantastic. So we've sort of got like a list of things that we would like to try. I mean, some of that is definitely about how to keep using NDI and Skype as a collaboration tool, absolutely. And then there's also things around in this time when a lot of people are making art online, how can we go further into that kernel of like, what is live performance, what is live theatre, what is that thing that really makes it feel live? So a bunch of experimentation around that offer, which really came from Google as the impetus for the sprint. And then certainly more investigations within the foyer of like how to build more community, more interaction, and so sort of like just sort of scratch the surface on a bunch of these things.
Great, and moving on, we end the presentation by saying there's more to come. I mean, as Kartini opened the presentation, this is a very much still in progress guide. You know, it isn't lost on us that a lot of the performers and artists and arts organizations who are going to benefit most from this are, exactly as I said, performers and artists and arts organizations, and we're not going to fully understand that skill set right away, but what we can do is listen, and we can help as best we can. So thank you so much. I hope you found something that was useful to you. Again, like, this will be shared far and wide. Feel free to share it with anyone who might think it's useful. It will be updated as well. And I will also say that our friends at Google Arts and Culture, which is another organization within Google, have made another deck called Connected to Culture, which will also get sent out to all of you as well. Please feel free to let us know what works, what doesn't. If there's another thing you think we're missing, like, we're all ears, and we're here to help. So I'm personally very grateful to Create New South Wales and all the organizations who have helped us along this journey. And I think we can move into a Q&A.
Thank you so much, Sean and Kartini. That was really interesting. One of the things that we touched upon, and we only touched upon in the first episode, which was almost something we didn't actually get to explore very much, but certainly have here, is the site specificity of, you know, online. And some of the things that you've been demonstrating in the projects that you've been doing is the sort of capacity to build in other functionalities that, you know, that don't work in the real world but do work on this platform, which I think is really an interesting thing, because we see a lot of what you were talking about earlier, Sean, these kind of direct transpositions of live performance to a, you know, basically a film of a live performance in this context, which doesn't kind of, loses a lot. But when artists start actually thinking about the possibilities of working on this platform and utilising the tools that are available, which you've been able to show us today, is just really fantastic. So yeah, I'd love to hear about what you're thinking about that is, and I guess engaging with artists that are used to sort of presenting in real life and then actually having to transfer those skills of site specificity into the internet.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess one of and maybe Sean, you can speak to this as well, but I think one of the beauty of the output or the experiment that the Last Great Hunt did, and they just had a really great attitude to thinking to what actually can we maybe do with these platforms. Now, spending a little bit of time kind of getting to know the different platforms, like what in theatre can we actually also utilize this platform? So like just the ability to be able to do, they said that a car chase and being able to do it in black and white were two things that you typically wouldn't be able to do in real life on a stage necessarily, and to that kind of scale. So that's kind of one example of how I guess people are thinking about that specificity. I'll struggle with that word. And yeah, I guess that's one interesting way to kind of think about it, but also just kind of thinking about how, like, maybe what was the performance that you had on the cards, and what, you know, how many actors it is, like, kind of, you know, taking what you would like to put online and how you could maybe achieve that by thinking about how many performers you would need to dial in, and how you can tackle it that way, and then thinking about hacky ways of using maybe what is around your home just to kind of elevate that performance. We've seen some great examples, with the Last Great Hunt, for example, of using you know, cardboard cutouts, or different ways of maybe using and thinking about the way that we use our webcam camera as a lens, and how could that maybe be hacked in different ways to, I don't know, if you put a filter, a physical filter over it rather than even just a software filter. That's kind of one way that you could add a different layer to your performance. Is there anything else that you have to say, Sean, maybe?
Yeah, well, one thing that I think is so interesting about this, I mean, despite the absolutely tragic catalyst for this creative development, there is a lot of excitement around this space. And I mentioned at the end of the deck that this is still in progress. And one more case study that actually will be in there by the end of the week is with a Queensland-based company called Opera Queensland. And in the opera world, one thing that we found was so fascinating was, like, opera makeup artists have always been thinking about adding, like, how do you add a makeup or add kind of facial effects to make your performer into what you want. And all of a sudden they were playing with these tools, and they thought, hold on, we can subtract parts of these faces. So they were using green face paint as you would a green screen to actually make parts of the performer's faces transparent and overlaid upon each other. And so I don't think there's a satisfying answer to the question yet, but what's so exciting about it is that we're still learning exactly what works and exactly what this new online format can hold for artistic expression. And we're very much still figuring it out. And that's what I'm very hopeful to see as this deck gets to spread a bit more, is that people start thinking about other ways that they can use the technology and kind of shift their whole thinking around their artistic form.
It's brilliant, thank you. We've got a couple of questions from participants. From Danielle O'Keefe, who says, thank you, this is really interesting. Looking forward to having a play with it all. They're wanting to check, is the platform add-ons like Stage 10 can be used to drag a pre-recorded video into a live stream?
Yes, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly which, but many of those platforms have that capability. Definitely go through the deck and see what's right for you. I believe Stage 10 can do that. Certainly some of the others can. Certainly OBS can. And yes, I mean, a lot of, we actually did see with one of our other performances with one of the Griffin lock-ins that they would kind of have a pre-recorded video sometimes that they could cut to, or even as people are joining the performance and in the waiting room, they might play a pre-recorded video, which is still very much a part of the stream.
And Nicole Van Bruggen from Australian Romantic Classical Orchestra asks, are there any other ticketing platforms which can connect to Zoom, PayPal, YouTube, or is Eventbrite also part of that same family? They have our ticketing system set up with TryBooking.
I definitely wouldn't say I'm an expert on ticketing, but I do know that Eventbrite is just like a very accessible, easy to set up kind of platform. So that's kind of why we wanted to be able to offer a solution for that for people who maybe haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. And I'm sure there's plenty of other ways or other ticketing platforms. But I think, I guess just bringing it back, not necessarily, it's just that it's, if you have any ticketing platform, I guess that offers like an online option, or, you know, I guess you could always just find a way to, like, you set up your event or your online performance through YouTube or a Zoom webinar or whatever it is, and with those details embed it in the ticket or your ticket information. So I think the important thing really in any ticketing platform is just making sure that it's clear that it's an online event and that you are offering your audiences options to be able to maybe donate rather than, right now it's just such a tough time economically as well. And while we know there's an appetite for people wanting to support the impacted arts industry, it's maybe just nice to consider like a donation-based system.
I think Kartini put it perfectly, and I'll just say in a bigger picture sense, the platforms that we are recommending it's not an exhaustive list and it's not a perfect list. We are still listening. We would still love to hear what works for you. We found Eventbrite, it had really great compatibility with Zoom and YouTube, and so we found it as a great approachable way to do it. If something works for you, or if you're an established arts organization with your own e-commerce platform and your own shopping cart and ticketing system, use that. I mean, we're not saying if this is not on the list that it's not a good software. We're hopefully providing a starting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just my knowledge has just increased exponentially after listening to you guys for the last half an hour, almost an hour now that you've been on board. Nicole also asked, I think, a second part to this question about can you use YouTube Live to do ticketed events which are embedded into a website, or can you make a private live video so that only people with the link can access it?
So you can. I would say it's not a foolproof system, which is why we've left it out in the sense of, I mean, you could have a system as simple as someone gives you a donation and you give them a link to an unlisted YouTube video that's private. There's nothing really stopping them from sharing that link far and wide. There's a bit of trust involved there. I would say another solution, I mean, just judging by what you're saying, you could embed the private or unlisted YouTube video into your own web page and only grant access to that web page based on if someone had bought a ticket. So another solution where I think, understanding what works best for you is great, and that both of those options sound great to me, and I'm sure there are many others as well.
Yep. And there's an offer of a collaboration here next. Carlin, thank you guys so much. I have an idea for creating some interactive music performances with MIDI. Would Creative Labs be able to collaborate on developing something like this?
Yeah, I'd say that's a Johnny question. I know he was in here earlier. I mean, definitely within the deck, we'll have a contact form. I'm not sure. I mean, that's, again, definitely a Johnny question, but I'm not sure what further case studies we're looking to do. I mean, what I will say is that we're absolutely listening. If you do choose to explore that, like, we want to hear how it went, what in our deck worked, what didn't. And yeah, definitely let us know.
Yeah, hi Carlin, it's Jonathan here. We are always looking for new collaborations. So please get in touch and let's have a chat. Sounds exciting.
And is there anyone else on in the participants logged in at the moment that wants to ask a question? If not, we might say thank you so much to Kartini and to Sean and to Johnny for joining us all this morning. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I've been thinking about those networks of connected software and things that are live, and QLab, and integrating all of that system together, and it's probably doing my head in, but somebody else will clearly get a lot out of that. And it's really interesting to see how those theatre technicians in that live space can then come in and actually make these things work in the digital, which is really exciting. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really, really fascinating. We're looking forward to being able to explore what you've presented in more depth through the resources that you're making available to everyone, and wish you all the best in these really trying times, and hope that you are able to achieve more fantastic artistic work online. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.